Perhaps the awesomest people I know are the people who reach out and help other folks. And they don't do it for a reward. They do it because they love people. These people come in all shapes and sizes, and they often don't look like what you might expect. I once witnessed such a reaching out moment. It happened the summer that I got my Ilizarov on my arm. I had to go up north for a trip. It probably had something to do with a hospital visit. A very close friend of mine had taken me there and was taking me back home. I was very religious at the time, and I looked the part. If I looked very religious, my friend looked anything but religious. He had long hair, he had a big dragon tattoo, an earring, and on that particular day, he was wearing a heavy metal tank top from one of his very favorite rock bands. We had driven through valleys filled with cities, and we approached a canyon that would take us home. At the mouth of the canyon, there had been an accident. The canyons were by far the deadliest roadways. We knew there was an accident long before we saw it. A miles-long line of cars stretched toward the canyon. I don't know how long it took us to get to the accident. There was a passenger truck missing its hood on one side. Across a ditch, a semi-truck rested on the opposite side. The semi-truck had its undercarriage ripped away. As we drove through the scene, I saw a blanket laying over the exposed engine of the passenger truck. I didn't know it at that moment, but a friend of mine was underneath that blanket. He had just graduated high school only months before that accident. We got through the slowdown, and it was smooth sailing for us. The other side of the road was clogged with cars that had nowhere else to go and had to wait it out. We finally cleared that long line of cars and were driving pretty much by ourselves through the canyon when we came across a Jeep pulled off the road. A family stood beside it, and their father was obviously struggling. My friend immediately said, "Hold on, I'm pulling over." My friend figured that they needed help. We pulled up behind the Jeep, but when we got out of the car, the father brandished the tire iron that he was holding at us. My friend kind of laughed and said, "Don't worry, I'm here to help." It was almost as if my friend had already used this standard response a few times. The father immediately lowered the tire iron and answered, "We got a flat tire, probably coming through that accident. I got the flat off, but I can't get the spare off the bracket." It was one of those Jeeps with a spare tire prominently mounted on the back of it. I watched somewhat amusedly as my friend and the father did everything they could to try to loosen the bolts on the spare. It definitely could have been a fun moment for a video camera. At some point, they were both staring at it, exhausted. My friend said, "Will the bracket come off?" "What good will that do?" the father asked. My friend said, "Maybe we can run it back to town and have a mechanic take the tire off the bracket." They found where the bracket was attached to the Jeep. Sure enough, they had no problem getting those bolts off. My friend had a very small car. He had to put down the back seat to get the bracket and tire in it, but instead of taking me with him, my friend took the father in the passenger seat. I knew that it was going to take a while. They ended up having to go through that accident site twice. It had to be hours before they showed up again. There I stood with this family that I had just met on the side of the road with my metal machine in a sling. I cannot say how many times I explained the situation to folks who pulled over to see if they could help. I know that several people stopped anyway. It was nice to see that there were so many thoughtful people. Finally, my friend's car showed up around the curve of the canyon and pulled up behind the Jeep again. Apparently, the mechanic they went to had a hard time getting the tire off the bracket as well. But now that the spare tire was separated from the bracket, it didn't take long to get the good tire on the Jeep, the flat tire on the bracket, and the bracket mounted on the back where it belonged. The family loaded up into the Jeep. But before we parted ways, the father approached my friend. He said, "I can't thank you enough for your help today. I have something for you." The father pulled out several $100 bills. I thought I counted at least 5. He tried to give the money to my friend. My friend immediately waved his hand and said, "No, I don't want your money. That's not why I did this." The father insisted, "I want to show my gratitude. You've earned it." My friend replied, "Just get your family where you're going safely. That's all I want." The father put the money away, shook my friend's hand, and said, "When I saw you get out of the car, I didn't know what to think." My friend laughed and said, "That's okay." "No," the father said, "it's not okay. The way that I reacted to you wasn't right." My friend just smiled and said, "Don't worry about it." The father wiped a tear from his cheek and declared, "You're a good man, among the very best." They shook hands again. The father got in his Jeep, and we got into my friend's car. The Jeep pulled away and disappeared around the next curve. My friend pulled onto the road. I was staring at him in awe. My friend noticed me gawking at him and asked, What? I immediately responded, grinning at him. Nothing. And we continued on down the canyon road to home.